Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to the afternoon. We've reached the midpoint of Web Summit as we move into the PM sessions. And for those of you who had a good time at Night Summit last night, you're not seeing things. We really do have two unicorns on stage. So this is just the way we roll here at Web Summit. We're going to talk about security in the cyber world and whether there is a magic solution, a silver bullet out there. And I'm delighted that we have a team here who can answer some of the deep questions. I'm going to start by asking Window, because she's worked in application security. She literally wrote the book on how we can make systems more secure. So I wonder, is the problem that we're not building solutions to be safe and secure from the ground up?
Well, there are a number of different kinds of problems. One is that the work of building security into every aspect of the system that you're building or the application, the product, that's only part of it. The other end of it is that the threat keeps changing. So we have to continuously revisit what we're doing. We have to make sure that the work that we're putting into securing our products is actually sufficient to the threat that they're under, and that is getting more and more sophisticated over time.
Okay. Now, we've seen an enormous set of changes come about in the IT infrastructure. We've seen the way people consume data, where they process it, where it's stored. And that's led to a whole set of new challenges for us as security professionals. Can we use those same technologies to help make ourselves more secure? Maybe George, if you...
Well, I certainly think the cloud has been a great way for security in terms of enabling other organizations to secure themselves in ways they couldn't before. And I think from a computing perspective, if we look at artificial intelligence, machine learning, these things just weren't all that effective until there was enough training data and enough computing power to actually be able to crunch all the numbers. So if we look at the new wave of infrastructure, I think there's two things. One, the delivery of security from the cloud is critical from a SaaS perspective. It just makes it easier. You can crowdsource all the data. You can help secure entire ecosystems as opposed to just silos. And then the second piece is, I just think the detection technology gets that much better from an AI perspective because you have enough training data and you have enough computing power.
Now, you touched upon machine learning, and that's something I know Emily Darktrace are at the forefront of using. Is if there is a single Holy Grail, could that be it?
Well, I think it's important to say there is no single bullet to cybersecurity. It's about a layered approach and doing everything from product development and securing the hardware through to actually monitoring activity. I think what Darktrace was able to do was working on the basis that there's going to be compromise of some sort within the network, within the firewall, whilst you should do everything you can to make sure that you have a strong perimeter and you're catching things that you know are malicious. You're always going to have advanced attackers. You're always going to have insider threat, frankly, which is going to be really hard to signature, to actually be able to characterize in advance. And so that's why artificial intelligence is very key, because it's able to learn what's normal, even without knowing in advance what that looks like. So actually using unsupervised machine learning in it to not have any pre-assumptions, no assumptions or sort of prejudice of what might be malicious, but actually find those novel threats that are actually emerging. And of course, the goal is really to catch them early and neutralize those threats early. You can't stop everything from getting in, but you can be very successful at thwarting those threats at a very early stage.
So if we're able to take and use these new technologies like the cloud and like machine learning and the improvement in computing power, is it not an arms race? Are the bad guys not just as able to go out and make use of the same stuff to turn it against us? Anybody want to?
So they do get more sophisticated, and it is easier for attackers than it is for defenders. But that doesn't mean the situation is hopeless. As defenders and builders of technologies that either secure infrastructure or secure systems or the software that we build on top of it, there are things that we can do that make it, that raise the bar for attackers. So they have to step up. And that includes leveraging the technologies that are part of the platform, whether that's cryptography or mechanisms that allow us to manage sensitive information better, whether that is scaling up to higher level languages to avoid the risks of memory corruption that can lead to vulnerabilities. All of those things make it more difficult to identify vulnerabilities or to write exploits that take advantage of those vulnerabilities in the system, and that makes it more expensive for the attacker to be successful.
It appears that one of the things that we have got better at is understanding who is attacking us, what the motivations are, where they're coming from, and trying to shut them down or take regulatory action, legal action against them. Is threat intelligence an important part of the defense arsenal today?
I think threat intelligence is an important part, and it isn't about finding someone and trying to put them into jail. It really is understanding the attackers, their tactics, techniques, their process, and really what they're focused on. And what people have to realize is that most organizations don't have unlimited time, money, and resource to be able to protect against every adversary. So I think it's important to understand who's attacking your organization. More importantly, what are they after? How can you marshal the limited defenses you have to actually protect against them? And the byproduct of threat intelligence is it actually helps you tell a story or a narrative to the executives. If you walk into a board meeting as a CISO, if somebody walks into a board meeting and starts talking about the Hydrack Trojan and XYZ malware, everybody's eyes glazes over. But if you can put it in terms of, this attack came from China, they were looking for our intellectual property here, it actually provides a narrative so that you can understand what you're up against, and generally results in more funding for the security group.
Yeah, I would.
Emily, a lot of people understand that a good outcome with security is to stop things before they happen. The military like to talk about the importance of being left of bang, trying to stop the bad stuff.
Yeah.
But is that an unrealistic objective? Or is the way that you guys approach things to make sure that as soon as the bad guys are inside, you shut them down? Has it become impossible to stop them getting inside in the first place?
Well, we work on the premise that you're going to have compromise inside. So, that doesn't mean you don't have to do everything you can to secure your border. Of course you should. But we're really looking at the pervasiveness of a level of internal threat, and also visibility, good visibility of your whole infrastructure, cloud and SaaS and remote working. So it's becoming increasingly difficult to keep track of that and spot emerging issues or vulnerabilities in your systems that you may not be aware of. So that is the whole premise of it. I think I agree with George. It's about communicating also to the board and making sure that you have a good narrative. I think the difficulty is Darktrace, we don't attribute things. We're catching them early. They're mathematically anomalous behaviors that we're catching, but we don't know always who is behind it, and so that can be difficult because you can extrapolate certain things. There's certain sophistication that we might be able to attribute to probably a nation-state actor or a criminal group. There's things we can do, but you don't always get to the point where you can attribute. But as a company, at the end of the day, your priority is to protect that intellectual property or your data, and your priority is not always getting to the end of an investigation. You want to, as you say, you want to shut it down earlier than that.
If we're admitting that there's always going to be sometimes somebody gets inside, there's obviously a need for skilled people to react, to have incident response, to do forensics. Are we facing an unending skills gap? Can we actually produce enough expertise to deal with these challenges?
So we do have a challenge right now where we have probably not enough skilled folks for the set of organizations that are looking for this skill set. So we do need to scale up capacity, but there are other things we can do to reduce impact of a compromise. Things like compartmentalization and isolation mean that even if a system is compromised, that it doesn't compromise everything in the environment. So we can mitigate risk in very traditional ways that are still incredibly effective. If you're physically isolated, if you have a small communication channel between systems, that reduces attack surface greatly. So a compromise of a single system doesn't necessarily mean the entire system is exposed. And while we're looking for that set of folks, providing ways for folks to transfer their skill set over to the security industry and leverage the skills that they're bringing while they're building up the security skills, that's something that as an industry we've just got to get better at. We've got I think, an accessibility problem, where it's a pretty significant investment from a study perspective to get up to the place where you're, let's say, as a developer, able to be very effective as a security engineer, or as in DevOps, to get to the point where you're actually very effective as security folks. But we can leverage this. We can make it more accessible through technology. That isolation and compartmentalization, they don't have to be security practices. If we expand the set of folks that we engage with this kind of work, it becomes a practice that everybody employs in what they're developing. We don't have to be security developers in order to say this set of best practices is important for security. For example, we take performance and we apply it to everything we do as software engineers. Everybody thinks about performance. It's not some set of engineers that come through and say, well, you better do this because we have a performance problem otherwise. It's something that we're all looking at through all aspects of development. Security really needs to be the same way. It's not something that someone else is going to come in and tack on at the end of your project. It's something that we all need to consider at all aspects of development throughout the environment. And when we have that skill set more pervasive in the industry, then it will be easier for folks to get to the place where they are able to transition into these security roles more easily, because we're not starting from a place where there's no common language, no foundation that we share.
Now, I have a follow-up question for you, because you've worked in some very interesting places. You're with Intel today, you've worked for Apple, and you've worked for Microsoft, which pretty much is the trifecta of the personal computer industry. So you're talking about the importance of building the security in. Do you believe that across the board companies are now really doing that from the ground up? Or has there been a change either in the way you've seen it done in the places you've worked, or just over time as we've realized the challenge that's out there?
So I think the industry as a whole is recognizing that this is critical to their future success, but I don't know that it's evenly applied everywhere. I think, unfortunately, we're still at the point where organizations think about it when they're feeling pain, not necessarily proactively, but once they feel a little bit of pain and they start to recognize that this is something that's going to impact them pretty significantly if they don't scale up their efforts, then they do start to work more proactively. So I'd say we're, as an industry, still a little bit inconsistent, but it's a lot better than it's been. And over the more than 2 decades that I've been working on it, I definitely say the recognition that it's important is out there. The part that's not as consistent is the investment.
Well, if we go beyond the journey we've been on so far, one of the phrases people might be confused by or wonder about is next generation. It seems like everybody and everything in security suddenly is talking about next generation. Does that mean, George, that we've had to throw away all the old thinking, or just that we've got better? Or what exactly are we talking about with next generation?
Well, I think if you look at what's out there in many cases, I call them fossilized vendors, particularly in the endpoint security space. And a lot of security grew up as an on-premise solution. You know, to me, they all look like Siebel's and not Salesforce. So I think when we think about next-gen, at least the way I think about it is, you know, it's a SaaS-delivered offering. It's something that's always, you know, there for you. It just works. It's like the consumerization of enterprise software, where you can pick up your phone and you know it just works, right? You should be able to go into your security application, just have it work, just have it do what it's supposed to do, and not need an army of people. And I think, you know, again, leveraging cloud technologies and leveraging a lot of the new science behind it creates something that's next gen. You know, will there be a next gen? You know, maybe. But I feel a big part of it is the shift from the on-premise siloed approaches into more of a, you know, cloud-based offering. As just one example. There are other examples that are out there, but I think that helps people at least conceive of, you know, what should the attributes be. Easy, it just works, and you know, you don't need an army of people, because you don't have an army of people, right, as we just talked about, to actually work all these products.
Okay. I want to go back to machine learning for a moment, because I read during the week that Elon Musk, he's been known to tweet occasionally, he's apparently announced to the world that 2 years from now his cars will be totally autonomous. He believes their artificial intelligence and machine learning is on that steep of a trajectory that they can do away with drivers entirely. How would you see that sort of timeline in the cyber world, Emily? When will we be able to say, you know what, we can trust our computers to make all the decisions, and if the computer shuts something down, deletes a user, terminates a connection, we let it do it?
Well, we're actually further along than a lot of people might realize in terms of allowing autonomous technology, AI, to take quite critical action. And I think autonomous cars are quite a nice analogy in a way, because we have been able to teach that AI to drive a car and learning from how to drive a car safely. For cybersecurity, taking Darktrace as an example, a third of our customers will use Darktrace not just to detect the emerging threat in their environment, but also to actually respond to it in real time without the human being there. Now that's a pretty big step forward, because you're having to trust, as the security leader, trust the AI enough to give it that autonomy and allow it to take action. And I think the catalyst has been very much the automated threats, and WannaCry was definitely a watershed moment where it was just, these threats were just moving too fast. It was seconds, few minutes before you could see really significant damage across many machines. So it was just that humans cannot respond that quickly. These are computer-generated attacks. There might be humans driving them, but they've got a level of automation that's enabling them to spread very quickly. And so the opportunity there is for the AI, with precise knowledge of what is normal for that machine to do and what is not normal, it can actually essentially enforce the normal pattern of life. So it's not about machine going wild and sort of shutting down stuff, because that just doesn't work. You can't disrupt the business, but about enforcing what we know is normal and actually stopping what the AI thinks is a sort of high severity threat.
Now, we have two Americans on the stage, and apparently there was an election yesterday, and politics is in the news in a big way, but it's interesting that politics has touched upon technology, in particular cybersecurity, recently in much bigger ways than ever before. And I wonder whether you think that's helped or hurt our ability to trust vendors based on where they come from, to trust staff based on where they come from, or has that just added an extra layer to the challenge of securing in a digital world?
I really believe that people are people, wherever they happen to be or wherever they're from, and that I always assume good intentions, but in any large group of people, there's always going to be somebody who maybe has a different set of priorities, or who might be vulnerable to suggestion. And so building systems that are resilient enough that a single bad actor has a hard time compromising the entire system, whatever that might be. So in a software development environment, when you write code, you check it in, it gets peer reviewed before it goes in. So it gets harder and harder for any one individual to introduce something that compromises the entire system. Multiple people are required to build. Multiple people are required before something gets pushed out into production. Access to data stores are restricted and auditable. It doesn't matter where your people are. I think for the most part we're all on the same team, but you still want to build systems that are resilient enough that it is hard for a single individual to compromise the entire system, even if it's an internal actor.
Now, our screens here in front of us are going wild with questions from the audience, so thank you very much to those of you using the app and submitting questions. I think we should take one or two and put them to the panel. I'm going to start with the bottom one, where somebody's asked that technology is like a knife. It can be good or bad depending on the user. In a liberal democracy, technology is used by oligarchs to control poor people. Is that true? Has technology gone that bad against us? Do we have a political commentary here?
Well, I think the one comment would be, clearly around elections and the previous elections. Obviously, it did raise this question of the integrity of systems that are critical to democracy and voting, and it's really important for citizens to be able to trust those systems. So I think we've got a lot of work to do to make sure that the public have a way of assessing, in a way, and I think we're going through the process of assessing our own products, but also understanding how we trust trust big public institutions. Obviously, the DNC hack was sort of a big watershed in this sense, and it's all about the integrity of data. In terms of oligarchs controlling poor people, I think clearly there's a bigger question there in terms of technology and social media and manipulating it, but there's clearly we're going through a period of change now, and being able to trust the integrity of data is central to that. And I don't think we're quite there yet.
And
I don't know if you've got any other comments.
Another potential holy grail that's been discussed is why don't we turn all the bad guys into good guys, and why don't we pay them for finding flaws in products? And I see somebody's asked exactly that question. Somebody called Sixto is asking, do we agree that formal practices and audits aren't enough, and that companies have to be open to other practices such as bug bounties and white hat hacking? In other words, paying people to do the right thing rather than profit from the wrong thing. Is that one of the approaches we should take?
I think at the point in time where you identify a practice that's effective, over time it becomes a formal practice. So bug bounties at time were, once upon a time, pretty sensational and unusual practices. And at this point, I'd say they're pretty mainstream, and that they're formalized even, that there are lots of companies out there that'll help you design an effective bug bounty system, that'll help you pay people who happen to be all over the world in their own currency. At this point, it's become a formalized practice. And as an industry that's out there, that's really, let's say, open to innovation and sensitive to effective practices wherever they may be, I think we're actually really good at recognizing, hey, this is working over here, I'll see if I can apply it in my environment, and taking those practices and making them a formal part of the security mechanism.
And we will take one more question in our remaining time, which is, how do you see security in a world of edge computing and distributed applications? Is that something that we can adequately throw a net around and lock it down and secure it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a shot at it. I think if you look at security, you have to change your mindset a little bit and think about workloads, and whether it's a desktop, a server, whether it's a full virtualized workload in the cloud, or sort of a micro, a serverless environment. They're just workloads, and the edge is now just blurred. There really isn't a network. So, the way we look at it at CrowdStrike is to figure out how you protect those workloads. Even if the applications are distributed, even if the compute is distributed, they still need to be protected. And there's really an emerging field now in dealing with all these micro-segmentations and trying to protect them. I think it's a great opportunity for a lot of people that are in the security field, and the threats are going to slightly morph, but it's still the same bad folks that are trying to get into these systems, and they're still going to be using a lot of the same techniques. It's just a new technology that is going to mature, and the security practices around those technologies are going to have to mature as well.
Okay, well, with that, unfortunately, we're just out of time, so thank you very much for your participation. Thank you for all the questions, and please, a round of applause for the panel and their expertise they shared with us.
Thank you.